Okay, boys and girls, we are going to practice finding common denominators and then writing equivalent fractions. And this is incredibly important that you get really good at this because in 5th grade, you will be doing it a lot. So we're going to start right here with 5/6 and 3/4. And it's asking you to find the least common denominator of 6 and 4. And the reason why it's saying 6 and 4 is because these are my denominators. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go right over here and we are going to find the least common multiple of 6 and 4. So I'm going to start with 4 and I'm going to write out the multiples of 4. So we have 4, 8, 12, 16. And as I'm doing this, I'm going to be thinking, is there any of these multiples that 6 also has? And when I wrote 12, I'm thinking, I know that 6 also has a multiple, 12 is a multiple of 6. So we have 6 and 12 when we're writing the multiples of 6. So 12 would be our least common denominator. Well, now we have to go and find equivalent fractions for both 5/6 and 3/4 that have a denominator of 12. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in my new denominator of 12. All right, so let's start with 5/6. And what you should be thinking is, what can I do to 6 to get to 12? Well, we multiply by 2. Well, if you do it to the denominator, you have to do it to the numerator. And I know y'all have heard me say this when we were working on equivalent fractions. So 5 times 2 is 10. So your new fraction would be 10/12. So down here, we're thinking the same thing. You start with your denominator and you're thinking, what can I do to 4 to get to 12? Well, 4 times 3 equals 12. So if I do it to the denominator, we've got to do it to the numerator. So 3 times 3 is 9. So this is your new fraction. 9/12 is equivalent to 3/4. Now, the main reason why we have to get really good at this is because you cannot add or subtract fractions with unlike denominators. I would not be able to add 5/6 with 3/4 because these denominators are different. So before you can add them together, you have to find a common denominator. Then I would be able to add or subtract these fractions. And this is a skill that you need to get really, really good at before you go to 5th grade. All right, so let's move on to number 2. So we have 2/9 and 4/12. So we are needing to find a common denominator for 9 and 12. So we're going to go through and we're going to start listing the multiples of 9 and the multiples of 12. And I'm going to start with 9, and while I'm listing these multiples, I want to be thinking, are any of these also multiples of 12? So if I'm doing my multiples of 9, 18, 27, what would come next? 9, 18, 27, 36. And I'm kind of thinking 36, I think, is a multiple of 12. So 12, multiples of 12 would be 12, 24, and then 36. So our common denominators should be 36. So I'm going to put up here, least common denominator of 9 and 12 is 36. So right here, we have 2/9 and 4/12. I'm going to go ahead and write in my new denominator of 36. So 9, what do I do to 9 to get to 36? Well, I can multiply it by 4. 9 times 4 equals 36. Well, if I do it to the denominator, I need to do it to the numerator. So 2 times 4 would be 8. So an equivalent fraction of 2/9 would be 8/36. Then down here, what do I do to 12 to get to 36? Well, if you're not sure, go and count your multiples. This is 12 times 1, 12 times 2. This would be 12 times 3, so it's multiplied by 3. Well, if I do it to the denominator, I have to do it to the numerator. So 4 times 3 would be 12. So now I have two fractions with common denominators where now I could go and add these or subtract these. All right, let's move on to number 3. All right, so I have 6/7 and 1/2, and we are needing to find common denominators for both of these. So I'm going to go and start listing multiples of 7. So I have 7 and 14. Well, 14 is even, so I know it's got to be a multiple of 2, which is true because we would have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and I'm running out of room, so 14 right here. So 14 would be our new common denominator. Our least common denominator is 14. One of the reasons why they talk about finding the least common denominator is because if I could go on and I could actually use 28 as a common denominator, but then we wouldn't have it in simplest form. So it's important to try to keep it with your least common denominator so at the end you might not have to simplify. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write in my new common denominator of 14. All right, so what do I have to do to 7 to get to 14? Well, I multiply by 2, and if I do that to my denominator, I have to do it to my numerator. So 6 times 2 is 12. Right here is 2. What do I have to do to 2 to get to 14? Well, we multiply it by 7. If I do it to the denominator, I need to do it to the numerator. 1 times 7 is 7. So these are my new fractions. One more example, and then you're going to have an opportunity to go and try this out on your own. So we have 9 and 18, and we are looking for the least common denominator. And I'm hoping that right now most of you are thinking, hey, 18 is a multiple of 9, and if you're thinking that, good for you. Okay, so my multiples of 9 are 9 and 18. Multiples of 18, well, you would start with 18 and then 36. But I really don't need to go that far because I've already gotten to 18. So 18 is actually going to be my denominator, my least common denominator. So right here, what do I have to do to 9 to get to 18? Well, you multiply by 2. Then 5 times 2 is 10. Down here, I don't have to do anything. That's times 1, so you just move that numerator over, and that fraction is actually going to stay the same. All right, I hope this helps, and if you have any questions, send me a message in Canvas. Miss you guys.